Hello, students. We are on our journey through essential science of therapeutic massage, and we are going to be talking about chapter 6, which means we're about halfway through the book. Chapter 6 is our last chapter in the systems of control, and so let's get going. And of course, I have to get my little glasses on. And let's go down with the table of contents, and we are on the endocrine system. So we can get rid of the table of contents here. A reminder of some of the features for the electronic version of the textbook. The way the textbooks are written is that the information is scaffolded and it spirals through. So if we wanted to learn about or find out where all the places that the endocrine system is mentioned, we can use the search button right here. So let me just copy endocrine and copy, and let's put it into a search. And then let's see what comes up here. And here are all the places that you can click on to find out about where the endocrine system is discussed, not just in this chapter. And if you click on this, it'll take you right to that page so that you can look on it. So it's really helpful to see this, to start to notice how much of the scaffolding and the overlap, how it spirals through from beginning to end of the textbook. So all these places is endocrine system. This happens to be in chapter 6 here, but here's chapter 9. It talks about it. Chapter 11 talks about it. It's here in the glossary. So just a little reminder on that. And let's get back up and get out of this. And so by now you should be familiar with how the study is going. People get a kick out of the endocrine system. It's got a lot of language to it, like the previous 2 chapters, the nervous system, but not quite as much. And I also think that this information is a little bit more familiar. Just as we have grown up, we have encountered more talk about hormones and the thyroid gland and all of that. So, okay, as always, here's our overview. Then we narrow down and talk specifically. And then we have our pathology. All right. You know the drill now with the chapter objectives. And you know, it's good to start here. Ask yourself, do I know what that is? Do I know what endocrine tissues are? Let's see if I got some examples, and then maybe I can confirm my initial thought process as I study through the chapter. Key terms. These are terms you're going to want to be able to identify, especially in written form. They may show up on the NBLEX exam, but they also show up, even more importantly, in research that you might read, something that the client might tell you, that you can go then and look up more about, starting with Medline Plus and so forth. Here is your learning how to learn, repetition, repetition, and then more repetition. And so make sure that you utilize the YouTube support videos that I post for you. And then we have our general introduction to what the endocrine system, what its main job is in the whole process of how the body systems work together, to keep us on a steady state, and then to respond appropriately to the internal or external clues on what we need to pay attention to or what we need to self-regulate. So this little example right here is trying to cue up your memory on other aspects of the endocrine system that you're already involved with. So I have a thyroid condition. I take a thyroid medication. If that thyroid medication is off, I'm very lethargic. So that's what this is about. So challenge your brain. This is part of repetition and recall. All right, so these are the these are the chapter objectives that are discussed in this particular section. And here are the main points that we're going to bring forth as we do this particular study segment. Mentoring tips bring things into perspective and they start to connect the dots. For example, here, this mentoring tip is talking about feedback loops that we discussed in chapter 2. Now we get into the language part of it. The various structures, the various glands and tissues. The hypothalamus is very interesting. I've mentioned it before. It's a relay station between the nervous system and the endocrine system. I get a kick out of the hypothalamus. So and I'm going to tell you to slow down and look at this particular figure just because I think the hypothalamus is very cool. Does a lot of stuff. The hypothalamus is the link between the body, mind, and nerve in endocrine function. It drives behavior to restore homeostasis, makes us hungry, makes us thirsty. It will direct stress responses by altering blood flow. It's very cool. The hypothalamus is active in how we interpret pleasure and pain, our expressions of emotion, and our sexual behaviors as well. So here are what the hypothalamus produces, and they're interesting. Some of these are interesting because the hypothalamus will secrete growth hormone releasing factor that then goes and talks to the anterior pituitary, which then stimulates the release of growth hormone. So there's always an ongoing conversation going. There's been a lot of study about the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is a network or a web, and there's a tremendous amount of talk that goes here, and it is a huge interplay for the stress response, as well as the different pieces that have to engage in order for us to return back out of a stress response into a rest and restore. This little box is interesting. It talks about adipose tissue as an endocrine tissue. And again, a little bit more information about how this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, an axis is a network, is a regulator of our stress response. So then you know how to use the review what you've learned, see how many of these terms feel a little bit more familiar. Any of them that don't, you can go back up and look, or you can copy and paste into the textbook search, or you can go and look on the internet. Just make sure that you're getting quality information and not, you know, look at reliable sites if you're going to go outside and gather information. All right, a practical application. And the National Institutes of Health are actively researching mechanisms behind complementary and integrated healthcare. And uh, the mechanisms of action are, what's really going on in the physiology. It's hard to pinpoint one thing because it's multiple things. The You can't say it's just this hormone or it's just that nerve stimulus. Everything is so intertwined. So it's not just the traditional endocrine glands. We have endocrine tissue. The box above talked about fat as an endocrine tissue. Our gut produces endocrine substances. I mentioned that in another video. The bacteria that live in our gut, the microbiome, they're endocrine producers. It's really it's really very intriguing about how we are symbiotic, and that there are many, not just our own anatomy and physiology that work together, but also our gut bacteria. All right. So these are other tissues that uh, are seen as endocrine producing structures. So back in chapter 2, we talked about Dr. Hans Selye and the general adaptation syndrome and the 3 stages of that: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. So now we're going to talk about that again. Alarm is actually a fairly efficient response. The endocrine neuro interaction is short-lived, and it's how we are physiologically wired to respond to a signal that something is changing in our environment. Adrenaline doesn't stay in the system for a very long time, and the body is a little bit more able to return to a steady state. However, in our current society, we're not usually able to solve the problem through the alarm response. And so we get into this resistance phase. And this is where a stressor becomes a mechanism of distress, and it starts to break down homeostasis and our body's ability to respond. So this enduring, this need to endure because you don't know what's going on. There are stressors that we can't do anything about. We've just got to wait and see what's going on. And over time, that will exhaust us. And long-term damage can lead to us not able to restore various endocrine function. Medical science has helped that a little bit because they can use hormone replacement, or there are some medications that will stimulate hormone production. It's never as good as how our body would do it naturally, but there are at least some medical treatments once the endocrine system may have reached a point where it's unable to restore itself. Endocrine function also weaves into a lot of the theory and critical thinking processes in ancient healing traditions. Um, a common correlation between the endocrine system and ancient healing traditions is the chakra system. And so here's a little bit of discussion about that. Okay, now we're specifically getting into the individual endocrine glands, tissues, and their hormones. So they don't know for sure how things work, but the working hypothesis is a lock and key kind of a situation, that cells have these little sites, and the various hormones that are released by the endocrine glands will fit. It's like they have a shape that will fit right into this, and that will trigger the cell to do something, which tissues are a collection of cells. And so it will change the amount of a particular hormone, or the type of stimulation that's going to the nervous system, or um, how fast or how slow cellular division is for a healing response. They still don't know for sure what it is. There are three main types of hormones, and neurotransmitters and hormones overlap. So neurotransmitters, by definition, are in the synapse of the nerve, where the nerve transmits from one to the other. So sensory nerve to an interneuron in the spinal cord, and then up again into the brain. So the neurotransmitter is in the synapse. That same chemical substance can also function as a hormone, but it would be in the blood. It would be carried through the fluids of the body. So peptides are more protein based, and we've got glycoproteins, and then we've got polypeptides. And then we've got more fat based. And so we've got your estrogens, thyroxine, and if we don't have enough protein in our diet, then that eventually will interfere with the ability for the body to generate these hormones. So leptin is one that they're studying right now for satiety, or appetite. And some of the weight loss medication that's being used now is interfacing in this particular area. The polypeptides here, you'll see them like oxytocin, for example. Uh, they interface a lot with some of our behaviors, observable behaviors. Endorphins are like our internal morphine, internal opiate, and the amines are known to be the hormone stimulant function for the vigilance, fight or flight phase, the alarm phase of the general adaptation syndrome. And then our steroidal based, cholesterol based hormones. And a lot of times people are on too low fat of a diet to be able to produce these effectively. So the chemical construct of the hormone can be affected by the nutrient and how those nutrients are processed. So a hormone is released, and then it will try to find its target cells and then it'll break down. So that's what a half-life is. So adrenaline, for example, that's part of the autonomic nervous system. Where is that up there? Well, I can't find it. It doesn't matter. That has a fairly short half-life. So in the stress response, the initial stimulus for that there's danger or something going on is adrenaline and noradrenaline. If something can't be solved, if the situation isn't resolved within that 15 to 20-minute alarm response, then it shifts more to a cortisol hormone resistance type phase. I think we've talked about that. So here's our individual pituitary gland and what it does. It's in direct communication with the hypothalamus. It makes growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormones. So here it goes again. The pituitary talks to the thyroid. Make sure you stop and read your little boxes and your practical applications. You're going to want to have a recognition knowledge of these. The oxytocin may show up on an MBLEX exam because there's a stimulation there in pregnancy and lactation, but also in touch. I wouldn't know that I would have you memorize specifically what the abbreviations and that sort of thing is, but a nice working knowledge. And here's a nice little picture about all that. The thyroid gland, you're going to want to pay attention to that. As we age, the thyroid gland tends to become less efficient in its function, and it shows up particularly in perimenopause. And some of the symptoms that people have, the aches and pains and stiffness and sleep disruption and that sort of thing, actually can be a thyroid issue, which can be treated. So as part of a health profession, and you have a client that's older and they're starting to have these symptoms show up and they're seeking massage thinking it's musculoskeletal related, but then it would be prudent for you to ask the question, when was the last time you had blood work and it looked at all of your endocrine function? Pancreas we're aware of because of the common occurrence of diabetes and the relationship between insulin and glucagon. The adrenal glands, we talk about this a lot. Sometimes it can get gimmicky where they talk about adrenal exhaustion and all of that, but it can occur. Just watch and you don't get caught up in somebody saying take this supplement or do this or do that with the adrenal glands. But it is where that alarm and that resistance, that alarm phase and that resistance shows up. And so it really can get overtaxed. So slow down and pay attention to this. And research has indicated that massage can interplay in this. And it's primarily through down regulating the fight or flight freeze response and then allowing the rest, restore, parasympathetic response to be more dominant. Sleep is very important right here. Aldosterone, the gonadal corticoids Oh, keep trying, right? The sex hormones are not just produced by the testes and ovaries, they are also produced in other endocrine tissues and glands, particularly the adrenal glands. So here's a focus on professionalism that you're going to want to pay attention to. The pineal gland, I think I mentioned in another video that this is sometimes connected with the third eye or in ancient healing traditions. It's an interesting, uh, the hormones are very interesting. They interface with vitamin D, exposure to sunlight. Vitamin D sometimes is classified as a hormone. It's been found to be very important with immune function and bone health. You don't want to you want to overtake it, but you do want to make sure that your vitamin D levels are optimal. The pineal gland, it secretes melatonin. People have sometimes used over-the-counter melatonin to support sleep. You, and it can help, especially when biological rhythms that we talked about in chapter 2 get disrupted, the light dark cycle. However, if you take any of these endocrine substances, the feedback loop monitors its levels, and so if the levels in the body appear to be sufficient, then the actual gland won't make it. So if you're taking melatonin, then your pineal gland isn't going to make it like it would under normal circumstances. So uh, it's gotten kind of popular and gimmicky, so it's really good. Melatonin is really good if you've had a disrupted cycle of sleep wake, like jet lag, or if you have been in a situation where your sleep quality has been diminished and you're trying to reestablish a sleep pattern, but don't just take it because. The thymus, they thought that it was only active, is here in the neck. They thought it was only active in infants and young, children and adolescents, but it is active throughout the lifespan. It does the production of its hormones do slow down with aging, but it remains active throughout the lifespan, and it regulates it interfaces with thyroid, and it works with the immune system, and it may be because the function diminishes over time. It may be why the immune system sometimes becomes compromised as we age. Endorphins, uh, these are more like tissue hormones here. Insulin growth factor, they're really looking at that. That one is, I think in the nervous system, I might have mentioned how they're trying to stimulate nerve growth, um, regrow insulin producing cells in the pancreas, try to get cartilage to regrow. So these growth factors could be a way to encourage, or are a way to encourage cells that don't divide quickly. Therefore, if there's injury or deterioration in the area, it's more likely replacement with scar tissue. But to try to get the functional cells to regrow, that's exciting. Here's more about the gut and the gastrointestinal hormones. Boy, are they studying this. Uh, you might want to do some additional study about this yourself. There are additional tissue hormones. They usually don't go throughout the entire blood system. They kind of work more locally. Prostaglandins, for example, is a tissue hormone. Um, and they are really interfacing with the inflammatory response. So, yeah, at least on a local level, the local level inflammation with prostaglandins and histamine result in vasodilation, pain. So, aspirin, for example, seems to work on these types of hormones, and that's why you get a reduction or a change in the inflammatory response. And then secondary to that, you get a change in the pain perception. So here's your review. And then here are our pathological conditions. So the general pattern with endocrine pathology is too much secretion, and hyposecretion. Uh, Hypersecretion for the thyroid, for example, causes an increased metabolism. Graves' disease is one of the pathologies related to hypersecretion of the thyroid. Hyposecretion, the thyroid is sensitive to a lot of different environmental things. It's also sensitive to attack by our own immune system, and it gets to be less efficient as we age. So that is the main pattern you're going to see with this pathology. Massage can help, but it's not going to directly increase a glandular secretion. What it is going to do is interact with that adrenal hypothalamic axis, pituitary axis. That is where massage comes in, and it dampens it, brings down that either that alarm response or that resistance response in the sympathetic autonomic nervous system. And then everything else kind of cascades around that, hopefully to normalize and be more efficient. So we also have in our environment endocrine disruptors, and those are chemicals that we're exposed to that mimic the action of the endocrine substance. So instead of the cell binding with a true, in that lock and key theory, instead of it binding with an actual hormone, what it does is binds with one of these endocrine disruptors. And this is becoming more and more of an issue in our environment. The replacement of hormone function it's one of the first medical treatments we had with that. They'd grind up adrenal glands from an animal, and they would feed it. They would use it as a supplement, or they did that with the thyroid. And so the use of replacement when hormone production is not enough for homeostasis has been going on a long time, and it's been getting better and better and better and better and better. Steroidal medication are used to interface and alter the inflammatory response, and that's why they're used for autoimmune conditions. The problem is that overuse of steroids can begin to suppress the pituitary gland and interferes with the negative feedback loop. And it's also hard on the mucous membranes. So, and then we also have, we mentioned aspirin earlier, we also have non-steroidal medications that work to control inflammation or dampen inflammation, but they also have side effects. All right, here's your indications and contraindications. Uh, Pituitary pathology, we don't see these very much anymore. Some, but there is a treatment process, replacement or suppression medication, so that these conditions are managed much better now than they were in the past. Diabetes is insipidus is more related to the pituitary gland, and they also have there is also a fairly good treatment. This is not the common diabetes that we see almost as an epidemic in our society. Thyroid is another one, and it is easily treated. It's not as good as if your body could do it on its own, but there is good treatment for thyroid dysfunction. And here is our indications and contraindications. So this table talks about the various thyroid hormones and what happens if there's not enough, and then what happens if there's too much. We can design activities that more support our endocrine function, primarily through interfacing with the autonomic nervous system. We need the stimulation of sympathetic activity just as much as we need the stimulation, the restoring capacity of the parasympathetic response. The issue is, approximately for every 15 minutes of energy burning activities within the sympathetic activation, the rest and restore time frame needs to be about 45 minutes. So our bodies our society doesn't support this. We are parasympathetically deficient, and this idea of dysregulated autonomic function that we talked about in the last chapter falls into this whole thing. And I don't have a solution, certainly, to how we adjust our lifestyle and our societal demands to relate like this, but we really need to watch a cat or a dog and how much they restore during the day, and try to get a little bit more of that rest and restore time. And this activity is kind of giving you a little clues on how to think about that. There are parathyroid pathological conditions. And here the pancreatic dysfunction, this is where there is a hyperfunction, but more than likely it's going to be diabetes that we're going to deal with. You really need to know about diabetes because you are going to see clients with it. All right. So indications and contraindications here. It goes back to, this is in diabetes here, goes back to some lifestyle management. So here's a little bit of a critical thinking activity to stimulate that problem-solving approach here. Then we get into our adrenal pathological conditions. When I mentioned earlier, adrenal insufficiency. pineal gland problems. Some of this can go back to seasonal, not just our 24-hour rhythms, but we also have monthly rhythms and seasonal rhythms. And some people don't have adaptive capacity around that as well, and they'll experience depression and or anxiety around all of that. So the light therapy, light boxes seem to help with that, and the levels of melatonin sometimes can be dysregulated in all of that. So here's the review, what you have learned, the summary, the scenario. Don't work your way through these try to take these little stories, try to take all of this information and put it together into something that you very likely might encounter as a massage therapist. Learn how to use these resources here. This particular story has to do with polycystic ovarian syndrome and prediabetes metabolic syndrome. That kind of all goes together there. It is increasing in frequency. So also work your way through these questions, paying particular attention to why the wrong answers are the wrong answers. And here is our reminder about doing the online course, the orange course, with its 25 questions that have to go into the little test bank here. Module 6 goes with chapter 6, the endocrine system. This one's, I had fun. I remember when I created this, I had fun with this. So, as you go through and click through, you might see some fun little pictures and stuff that go with it. Remember, when you link on these, they may or may not work. That doesn't matter. So there's multiple ways you can use this. You can go through this first before you look at the chapter, or you can do it later as a review, or you can do it in conjunction, because the content in the module tends to follow along sequentially with the textbook. So here, let's see if this one plays. Cast of characters of the endocrine glands. So this is what will show up if it is not going to play for you, as an example. So here is information about that hypothalamic pituitary axis and so forth. So this online course, even though some of it might be a little bit dated, it's 99% of it is still very relevant. And I don't know if this one will play or not. Let's see. All right, so again, it says, we're sorry, but this content has been removed because Flash, which this course was built on, is no longer supported. So, boo, but you just click onto the next screen and there you go. All right. This concludes our unit on systems of control. And it's one you're going to want to go back to on your announcements page for fundamentals. I have for each chapter that goes through both in essential science and fundamentals, I have posted a lot of support YouTube videos, and that's what I post at the beginning of each month for you to support your self study as we prepare for our Zoom classes at the end of the month. And all your chapter tests and your module tests, those help you prepare for us to discuss it during our Zoom classes. So pay attention to the support material that is provided for you and find your own. If you find something really good, do share it with us. So after this now, we're going to get into the kinesiology and biomechanics chapter. That is going to be bones, joints, muscles, and then biomechanics. So enjoy the endocrine system. It's important.